Hi guys. Today I'm going to tell you more about my story and my wife's story, but we'll get to that right after this. The beginning of a new year is when many people start thinking about their goals, and I'm no exception. The Goal Process 101 ebook has helped me clarify the best and most achievable goals for me, plus helped me set a plan in place to accomplish them. I mean, this podcast is just one of the results of using the Goal Process 101 ebook. Check it out at christiannerdsunite.com/goals. It helped me. I'm sure it can help you too. Now, back to the show. Today is Monday, April 19th, 2021. It's pretty late in the evening, and I wanted to take a few minutes because this is kind of a special day for me. So I wanted to take a few minutes and kind of tell you a little bit more about my story and my wife's story and kind of how I got to where I am right now. But before we get into it, I do want to read a couple of scriptures, and I know this was one that I've read multiple times, and because it's pretty integral to this story, and it's Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I also want to read 2 Corinthians 4:16 and 17. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. As I mentioned, this is Monday, April 19th, 2021. Now, you're probably listening to this on Tuesday morning or later in the week, or who knows what day you're listening to it. But April 19th is kind of a special day for my wife and I want to kind of explain some of that to you. I've mentioned part of my story, part of our story, from time to time, and I thought maybe this is the time I should go further into it. I've been doing this podcast for almost 6 months now. I can't believe it's been that long, and I think it's probably time I really laid out the story for you. So, first of all, I want to tell you, I am married to a cyborg. Yeah, you heard that right. I said cyborg. So many of you, if you're a DC fan, you're probably thinking of the DC character Cyborg. If you're into cyberpunk, you probably have some interesting ideas in your mind. If you're a Star Trek fan, you're probably thinking of the Borg right now. Well, my wife is a cyborg. She has a total artificial heart. And what that means is she no longer has a fleshy heart at all, and she has a pump that's physically implanted in her chest, and she has an external air compressor that actually runs the total artificial heart. It's a pretty amazing process, and it's runs off electricity. We plug her into the wall, quite literally, all day long, and she can run on batteries. We even have an outlet adapter for plugging her in the car. So there's some strange things in my life because of that. But that is part of our life. That's part of our story, and it has been for the last couple of years. So let me get into it. Why does my wife have a total artificial heart? And I don't know how much of this story I've ever really shared on the show, so I wanted to go a little further into it this week than I usually have. November 19th, 2018. Now, the weekend before, we were kind of lazing around the house. We didn't do a whole lot. laid in bed more than we probably should have. We were tired. We'd had a really long year. We've had a long summer. We had a big trip. We went to Europe. We had band contests almost every week, every weekend. And this was kind of the first weekend we'd had to just relax, because our kids were in school and they just did so many things. And, this is 2018, so this is a couple of years ago. But that Monday morning, she goes to work, November 19th. And that's just one day before her birthday, by the way. She goes in and she has this kind of spell at work. She doesn't feel good at all. She's super winded. Even just walking across the room makes her almost completely exhausted. And her heart is racing, not quite sure what's going on. She worked at a hospital at the time. And because she worked at the hospital, one of the nurses said, well, let's check you out. And they hooked her up to an EKG real quick and said, I don't know what this rhythm is, but you're going to the emergency room right now. So they put her in a wheelchair, drove her down to the emergency room right then and there. Shortly thereafter, she was admitted. Now, my wife had some heart issues in the past, very, very minor, and they had put her on some blood pressure medicine thinking, that was be taking care of it. And these may have been completely unrelated issues, actually. So it wasn't the first time she'd gone to the ER with a questionable heart issue, found nothing, changed her blood pressure medicine, and everything was good. So our expectation was, okay, well, you'll get a change of your blood pressure medicine and we'll be out of here in a few hours. Well, they ended up admitting her. She stayed in the hospital for her birthday. Now, I said that was November 19th. So she was in the hospital for her birthday. She was in the hospital for Thanksgiving that year. So that was a little odd for us to have Thanksgiving at the hospital. But still, we weren't really worried about any of the situation. We figured everything would be figured out. Because it was a holiday, they did have to basically wait until the following Monday to really do anything. They had decided there was something going on with her heart and they couldn't figure out what it was. So they wanted to do a biopsy. And on Monday, they attempted to do this biopsy. And they also did a couple other procedures on her heart that they were hopeful would help with the strange rhythms. I won't go into all the medical jargon there, but suffice it to say, those things did not work and actually made the situation much, much worse than it had been. Not that it wasn't bad already. We just feel like these procedures kind of caused things to move ahead more quickly than they would have if we hadn't had those procedures done. Within just a few days, we had a situation where we weren't sure whether my wife was going to be here another day. And one evening, I believe it was a Wednesday night, my entire family from 2 hours away comes into town. Her family is driving into town because we're not sure we're going to see her for another hour. Honestly, one of the darkest times I've ever had in my entire life. Not sure what's going to happen to my wife. And in a situation where I have no control and all I can do is ask the doctors what they think they should do. Well, the doctors had discussed a procedure that would basically bypass her heart temporarily, but because of some extenuating circumstances in her anatomy, the doctors there felt like they were not capable of doing it. So one of the doctors made a few phone calls, and a hospital from across town agreed to come and look at her case and to do the procedure. And they put her on something called ECMO. If you're not familiar with that, basically it is what back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, you might have heard called the heart-lung machine. Basically where they put in two hoses to your body, and they take all the blood out. They filter it, oxygenate it, and put all the blood back into you in a rotating cycle. And basically, they don't necessarily bypass your heart, but it does the work that your heart should be doing. Now, this hospital, they came in, they did the procedure, transferred her to their hospital, and we still were not sure how this was going to play out. Because they were able to do this procedure, they were able to save her life. Now, that procedure is pretty drastic, and the way they had to do it, because of the way some of her veins and arteries were, it basically immobilized her. She was on ECMO, on this heart-lung machine, this external machine that ran her blood out of her body and back into her body for 45 days, while we were trying to figure out exactly what happened, why it happened, and what the solution was. Well, after a week or so on this new machine at the new hospital, we finally got a diagnosis. And it was something called giant cell myocarditis. Now, feel free to look that up on your own time, but suffice it to say, it is a super rare disease. If you look up the studies on giant cell myocarditis, there are not thousands of people in those studies. There are tens of people in those studies. It is a super, super rare disease, and no one knows how you get it. No one knows why you get it. And no one knows how to get rid of it in all reality. The only real solution for someone with this disease is a heart transplant. Now, because of some other medical issues that my wife had, and I'm not going to go into all the science. Some of you guys science nerds out there are like, tell us more. It gets really complicated, and there are way too many words for me to explain. But because of her situation, because of where we're from, as far as what city and state we're from and the area we're in, it was almost impossible for us to get a heart transplant for her within a timely fashion. So they brought us the option of a total artificial heart as being the best and probably the only solution that would save her life and be able to take her off of the ECMO machine. And we did decide that that was the direction we should go. So come January 14th, 2019, my wife became a cyborg. They removed her fleshy heart. They replaced it with a plastic pump, and she has two air hoses that actually go into her body and an air compressor. You see the air compressor, you think it looks like the kind of air compressor that you plug into your cigarette lighter and pump your tires up in your car. It's about that size. But it's pumping air into her artificial heart and actually moving the valves back and forth. And it is literally pumping the blood, the lifeblood, through her body. A miracle of modern science. And I thank God that I live in this day and age when that's possible. If this had been 20 years ago, my wife probably would have passed away that day, barring a miracle from God. In today's age, we were able to save her in a very, very unique and special way. And it had a lot to do with the hospital we happened to be at. Now, fast forward. When you have a surgery this extensive, you stay in the hospital for a long time, and you recover for a long time, and you go through some rehabilitation for a long time. My wife in total was in the hospital for 5 months. So I said April 19th was an important day for me. April 19th, 2019. So 2 years ago today, I brought my precious bride home for the first time in 5 months. It's crazy to think that she was in the hospital for 5 months, but that's what happened. So, the idea of the total artificial heart was simply to get us through until we could get a transplant. because of some of her medical situations. They weren't sure we were going to be able to do a transplant here in Oklahoma. And that was something that we were cautious about. But when you've had that kind of surgery, they don't want to turn right around and do a transplant. And almost no hospital would have been willing to take her at that moment. So she needed to wait and do some recovery. So we waited. And about the time we were thinking, it's probably time. It's been almost a year, March 2020, no big deal. February 2020, I think it's time we talk to them about, starting the process for getting a transplant. Well, as you know, March 2020 rolled around and COVID showed up. COVID delayed our process for another year, basically. So she's been on her total artificial heart now for 2 years, over 2 years. And one of those years is basically because COVID shut everything down. No one was going to consider her for a transplant. No one was going to consider moving her to another state to look at this transplant. It was just the perfect storm of, wait till you've recovered. Oh, wait, you have to wait because, the world is burning down because of COVID. So that's where we were. Fast forward to about a month ago. The doctors come to us and say, we want to start the process again. We want to get all of your labs together. And I mentioned this on the show last week, and this is part of the reason I wanted to talk about it this week. I mentioned it just in brief, but several people reached out to me and made comments about, my wife, that they're praying for us. And I thought, this is an opportunity for me to share with you guys the whole story. And what we have been through over the last 2.5 years. So the doctors came to us and said, we're ready. Let's get all the paperwork together. Let's get all new labs, and let's send that information out to multiple hospitals around the country. And right now we're looking at 4 major transplant centers in the U.S., and we're still doing labs. We've got actually more labs again tomorrow. When I wake up early in the morning, we're going to head to the hospital and get a bunch of tests done. No spending the night or anything like that, but, chest x-rays and ultrasounds and things like that, just to make sure everything is the way they think it is. That's where we are right now. And we're hopeful that one of these centers will accept her the way she is, with all of her other medical issues that we have going on, and that we can eventually get a transplant. Now, some of you are listening going, that is an amazing story. And how do you tell that story without just bursting into tears? And I'm here to tell you, I'm not sure. It is my story. It is our story. It's my wife's story. There's not anything I can do to change it. It is what it is, and it is what we are living. And I will continue to live it day by day. Now, when you hear a story like this, and I'm sure you've heard other stories, you've had friends that have had tragic situations where they were in the middle of questioning whether they were going to lose a spouse, lose a child, or they went through the actual loss. And you think to yourself, what do you do for people when they're hurting? And that's what I want to share with you today. What can you do for people around you who are hurting? Well, here's a couple things I'm going to tell you not to do. I hear this a lot. A lot of Christians will say this, and it's one of those Christianese sayings that just isn't accurate. And it goes, God does not give us more than we can handle. It's said with good intentions, but it's pretty much a misinterpretation of 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. That is not the same as saying God does not give us more than we can handle. This very, very specifically is talking about temptation. This very specifically is talking about God giving us a way out of temptation if we will take it. Now, the other reason that this quote of God doesn't give us more than we can handle isn't accurate is that in 2 Corinthians 1, 8 through 11, Paul specifically says this about him and Timothy. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. Right there, Paul very clearly says, we couldn't handle this on our own. Okay, verse 9. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us. As you help us by your prayers, then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of the many. So Paul is very clear. We were in a situation we could not handle on our own. God gave them a situation they could not handle, but God could. So, just a reminder, don't say God won't give you more than you can handle. That's just not accurate. God won't give you more than God can't handle. And God will provide a way. Now, let's go on. I also recommend, don't say that you understand. You know, I hear that a lot. Oh, I totally understand. No, you don't. Whatever the situation is, you don't understand. You haven't lived their life, experienced the things they have experienced. You don't understand what they're going through. You may have some idea. You may have experienced something similar, but you don't understand what they are going through. Another one that I recommend not saying is that God has a plan for all of this. Simply because it doesn't help. The problem is the wording and the timing of this is just off. It can oftentimes do more harm than good. I hear people in this situation say words like, well, if this is God's plan, then I don't want to have anything to do with it. And that is not a good way to help support someone. Because now you're in a confrontational situation with someone who is already hurting. Let me be clear. Just because God knows what will happen does not mean he wanted it to. What do I mean by that? Sometimes it comes down to our own personal mistakes. If I fail in sin, and that is what I'm grieving over, that can't be God's purpose or God's plan because I screwed it up. That's just the way it works. And sometimes it comes down to our personal mistakes like that. But eventually it all comes down to the fall of man in the garden. God's original plan was perfect. And sin came into the world and the plan changed. I don't have another way to explain that. Does God have a perfect plan with Christ coming and giving his life? Absolutely. And some will say, well, those two things can't be true at the same time. And I challenge you and I simply say, I believe they are. God had an original plan, and God's current plan is perfect. To say to someone who is hurting, this is all part of God's plan, I do not encourage you to say that. I think it will cause more problems in the long run. So, what can you say? Here's what I recommend. First, say this: I can't imagine what you're going through. Say that with me one more time. I can't imagine what you're going through. Because that's true. That shows empathy. It shows that you know they are hurting in a way that even you can't understand, even if you've been through something similar. You can say, God will be with you through this. And I bring that back to Psalm 34:18 that I read earlier. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The third thing you can do is just to be there. I want to tell you a story. So, the darkest day of my life, I am fearful that I am about to lose my wife. I get a call from one of my best friends, and he says he's coming up to the hospital. He and his wife are coming up to the hospital. At this point, we're about to change hospitals, and I let him know, but we're still not sure what's going to happen. You know, this other hospital comes in, they get her on the ECMO machine, they transfer her to the second hospital, but we don't know if she's going to make it the next few hours even. I get sent down to the cafeteria by my family to go get some food. And I look up and I see my friend. And he and his wife show up, and they don't say anything. They set a paper sack next to me on the table, and they just sit there with me. I look in the bag, and there's snacks, and there's food that I could warm up in a microwave somewhere, and a blanket. And it was sweet. It was the perfect thing for right then. There were no words to comfort me. Nothing anyone could say could make that moment better for me. But simply being there, simply showing up and showing love, that was enough. And I want to encourage you to do that for your friends who are hurting. Just be there, just show up. Even if it just means bringing a paper sack of snacks and sitting for a while. Well, I hope that gives you some guidance on what you can do for your friends who are hurting. I hope today's episode is a little different, but I hope it has encouraged you. I am encouraged. Don't get me wrong. I have hope. I have faith that God is going to provide for us in the future. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I have faith that it will happen. That's really all I have for us today. Oh, don't forget, you can find all of our social links and our online store and our YouTube channel at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. And while you're there, check out our support tab. You can check out our Patreon. That's a great way to donate to the show, and it helps pay for some of the expenses we have, like keeping the website going and keeping the podcast hosting going. It's not free. I have to pay for that out of my pocket. So anything that you give can help defer some of those costs. Before I go, I do want to pray a blessing over you. Loving God, we thank you for hearing our prayers, feeding us with your word, and encouraging us. Take us and use us to love and serve you and all people in the power of your Spirit and in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. We'll see you next week.